Good morning, everyone, and welcome on in. My name is Yellow Lard. I'm a local singer-songwriter. And I'm also teacher in the School of Media and Design. I'm teaming up this morning with our wonderful friend Emma the Internet, and we're teaming up this morning for Earth. Are we hearing me any better now? Still choppy. It goes perfectly in sound check. And then when you go live, it's always the same, isn't it? what kind of morning would it be without a few technical hiccups? But I hope I absorbed all of the technical problems for the rest of the morning. Thanks so much to Emma, our urban botanist, for being here. And thanks so much to the event team for having me once again.
Well, it's time to start our town hall, and I want to thank Danielle Allard, full-time faculty member in our School of Media and Design, and Emma Terrell, who's the creator and owner of the Urban Botanist, for starting us off this morning with music and with visuals to bring awareness to Earth Day. That's right, today, as you know, is Earth Day 2021. Our Mother Earth has and continues to live to her secret instructions to care for us all, both living and non-living things. And we are thankful. And you can express your gratitude by posting in the chat how you're going to recognize and celebrate Earth Day today. So good morning, my name is Claude Brulé. I'm your president, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our town hall. As a guest on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, I'm honored to offer an opening. We do these openings of thanks in this fashion as they are the words that are spoken before all else when we embark on important gatherings and events such as what we're doing today. And so we offer to the Creator our prayers, tobacco, and our hearts. We say thank you to the grandfathers and grandmothers of yesterday, today, and tomorrow for keeping and sharing their knowledge. We say thank you to the spirits of the wind, water, fire, and earth. We say thank you to the spirits of the north, the east, the south, and the west. And we ask the Creator to please help us live our lives in a good way, and for us to be together today with a good mind. Miigwech. So welcome again to our town hall. As I said, today's format will be a little different, and we advertised that accordingly. We said that today we would focus on the results of our recent Pulse survey. So we have dedicated the front end of that so that we can inform you of those results, and then we'll have a Q&A session specifically for those results. And once we reach about 75 minutes, if I see that questions regarding the survey results seem to wean, then we can move to more general town hall questions. So housekeeping rules as always first. So if you have any technical questions or concerns, please reach out through the chat box and the events team will assist you. We have closed caption. It's available by clicking on the closed caption button on the main bar. It's now a feature that's integrated into Zoom. So to get started with our Pulse survey results presentation, we will have David Soltis, who is the Director of People and Culture in our HR department, and Zach Beauchamp, Managing Partner at Metrics at Work, who's been involved with the analysis, and both these gentlemen will present the results and then facilitate their own Q&A. So I'll turn it over to David and Zach. Take it away.
Thanks, Claude. I know Zach is going to queue up the presentation, so I'll just give a moment for that to come up. Hello, bonjour everyone. My name is David Soltis, and I am Director of People and Culture and Human Resources. I'm pleased to present to you today, along with our partner Zach Beauchamp from Metrics at Work, the results from our Employee Engagement Pulse survey conducted earlier this year. The agenda for today, if we can just go to the next slide, Zach, will include background information on the survey itself, followed by a walkthrough of the overall college results. We'll take a look at departmental scoring comparisons, as well as remote working results. And finally, we'll conclude with themes from the open-ended questions, followed by next steps. Some background information on the survey itself. So we'll go to the next slide. The Pulse survey was designed and launched in partnership with Metrics at Work. Unlike the 2019 full employee engagement survey, the Pulse survey focused on collecting feedback on the college's response to COVID-19, the employee experience with remote work, psychological health and wellness, and resources provided by the college. The survey was reviewed, tested, and validated by multiple stakeholders and marketed through memos, promotion on MyAC, reminders to ACLT, and direct emails to employees. The survey was launched to all paid active employees at the college. There was a total of 20 questions. The survey window lasted between January 26th to February 19th. Overall, we received a total of 1,830 responses, resulting in a response rate of 51.2%. In comparison to the employee engagement survey conducted back in 2019, we received 2,287 surveys for a response rate of 58.1%. The response rate of 51.2% for this Pulse survey still provides a reliable sample and is in line with response rates from other colleges who are conducting similar surveys during the pandemic. I will now turn it over to Zach, who will provide additional background information on the survey and can complete a walkthrough of the college survey results. Over to you, Zach.
Thank you, David. So we've been doing surveys with universities and colleges and operating for about 20 plus years. And I've been doing this work with Dr. Yardley since the beginnings of our research in Brock University, where we were the Wellness Institute for about 7 years and then broke off and incorporated as Metrics at Work. And we've worked with quite a number of colleges and universities in the last 5 years, even more over the last 15 years, but these are the most recent relevant data, which will be compared as the higher education sector when we do get to that. A couple notes on confidentiality. The survey was voluntary. We managed all of the survey and reporting processes, and we hold all that raw data anonymous to the college. And that means no individual results will ever be returned to Algonquin College. It's in our contract that we hold the raw data. We don't give it back. So even if we were asked for it, we couldn't give it to the college. If asked even. Only group results have been reported to leaders, typically at the VP and the Dean Director level. For 10 or more, any groups with 10 or more survey respondents. That was our minimum reporting rule. So the survey measures included in this Pulse survey had 10 questions that compared to the 2019 full survey. Those are in green on the screen right now. We measured, and our model looks at engagement at various levels. So we know that people can be differently engaged with the work they're doing, which is job engagement, from the way they feel about their department and how morale is in their local work environment, and differently engaged about the organization as an employer. So we look at engagement as outcomes on that level. And then we measure what we call drivers of engagement, which in the Pulse survey, we've included questions around workload, work-life balance, and psychological health and wellness, including things like response to COVID, psychological health, communication. So there's a number of things in that area where we're reporting these as overall indices and then also breaking them down by question. Each of those questions and areas were responded to on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. And the percentages that we're showing for the most part in this slide deck are based on the mean across that full response scale. So not just the agree or strongly agree, it includes the full range of response. We convert it to a percentage, so it's a little easier to understand as opposed to a mean Likert number like 2.5 or 3.5. So essentially you're looking at scores out of 100 for any one of those measures that we do show. And when we look at the normal range, when we roll things up to an overall college, for example, usually the highest driver or the highest scoring question is around 80. The lowest is around 55. So those data aren't quite a normal distribution like we might have learned in school, but in these surveys, they're skewed a little bit to the positive side. And when we look overall at Algonquin College, those questions, of all those questions, the highest scoring overall was 89 and the lowest scoring was 61.4%. So that range, just to give an idea, is a notch above. There's a higher high and a higher low for Algonquin College overall in your Pulse survey. But when we look into lower levels, so as we go down into say ACET, and in our reporting, we call it level 2. And we also go down another level and call that level 3, which is basically deans, directors, senior managers that way. And so you see that on the upper ends, one of, I think it's 6 of the sort of VP level 2s have one question that scored as high as 97, one that scored as low as 38. And that variation, that difference gets even wider, or dropping down even lower with one of the dean director groups with one question scoring as low as 28. So it's not all questions like that, but you see the range. And so a lot of the follow-up that I'll be pointing to is really kind of in these areas where there's where there are low areas for certain groups and differences. So it's small pockets. The overall results are quite strong, as we'll see. The overall response rate was 51.2, as David mentioned, which is on par with what we're seeing during the pandemic with colleges and doing pulse surveys of similar types of surveys. I'm just going to pull up some other response rates. I've highlighted or bolded rather the strongest response coming from full-time, 13 plus hours, non-union, and academic being 50% of that sample. And even the breakdown there within academic support and admin by male, female. We did have a non-binary option, but there were less than 10 respondents for under each of those academic support or administration. So this is just a quick picture of who responded to the survey in that 51%. There were other demographics, as I mentioned, gender, we captured some other information, age, tenure, and location. And one of the main takeaways here was that from the response rate that we've got, the highest percentage were from millennials, followed by Gen Xers. And the highest population by years of service were 2 to 5, followed by 6 to 10. So that's the demographic of who responded to the survey. Looking at some of the results now. And again, as I mentioned, we roll these up into these bigger sort of indices. The top 3 are what we call outcomes. And then the bottom are more around drivers, the things you act on to affect change, to get higher levels of engagement, for example. And the blue bar shows the 2021 pulse. And strongest was job engagement, followed by psychological health and well-being. And I'll just pull up for a bit of relative difference. Compared to the 2019, what you're really looking to see is the blue bar higher than the orange bar? And it is in every instance, except for workload and work-life balance. And then just to get another frame of reference compared to our higher education sector, which I showed on an earlier slide, the blue bar is also higher than the green bar in every instance, except workload and work-life balance, where it is the same, in fact. So again, the takeaway here, there's some pretty strong psych health and well-being results, almost as high as job engagement. And when I was going over those scale results, I should have mentioned 70% or higher means that on average, people are choosing somewhat agree, and strongly agree. So that a good score is 70% or higher. And you've got that at your roll-up level, college overall. For most areas that were measured, department engagement and work-life balance is a little bit low, and morale is a bit lower in certain pockets. And that's we're going to unpack that a little bit further in the slide deck. So all questions measured, compared on this slide, and comparing to the higher education sector, where applicable. So the pandemic questions we don't have measured in higher ed as much yet. And your difference compared to 2019, the highest scoring areas at the very top, these are each of the questions, so you can see the wording here, not just the index heading. We're around job engagement, so being willing to give extra effort, enjoying one's work. And I'll just pull up the rest of that slide as well. So looking at the lowest scoring area is around workload, and in particular, fair workload distribution in my department. So some really strong areas there, again, as we sort of saw at the index level, but engagement, I would not leave. This is one of the engagement questions. I would not leave and go to college if the equivalent job came. And these are strong differences from our ed sector. When we're doing statistical significance, which we're not noting here, it takes sometimes 0.2 percentage points difference. We color code things that are 5% or more as significant in our reporting, just because that's an observable, very notable difference, and you've got that here. And the only thing different as well here from the previous slide is work-life balance rather, being lower, just marginally lower, and gone down. So highlighting those strengths, I won't read all these. It's well, I've just gone through already, but a lot of strengths in terms of job engagement, feeling comfortable approaching my manager, supervisor with issues, communications around the COVID, around the pandemic, organizational engagement. The college cares about me, and feeling energetic, enthusiastic about my work. And there were quite a number of groups that scored higher, 80% or higher even. So 4 of those 6 level 2, we'll call them, and 16 out of the 21 dean director sort of level 3 had 5 or more groups that were 16 had 5 or more groups that were 80% or higher. So these are some really strong results, some of the strongest we've seen in pulse surveys in colleges and universities. The low areas, as already mentioned, around fair work distribution and work-life balance mainly. And just a small number of groups, a few pockets where there were 5 or more questions that had less than 65% in any of those drivers. So small pockets, as I mentioned, pretty good results overall. I'm going to go to showing some of those questions broken down by different groups. And so I mentioned level 2, we'll call that a VP level. And then there's some level 3, we're color coding those groups that had, again, 10 or more respondents across the bottom. Some of the groups didn't have lower level, so these 3, academic, finance, and admin, and student services, have quite a few groups that are going to be color-coded. So pulling them up. The black bar is showing Algonquin College overall for this question, which is workload is distributed fairly and evenly in my department. And so I'm going to pull all those up now so you can see the color coding. And really what I'm showing here is the difference to the black bar. And there's a line there if you can see it across the top. So even in an area that was low overall, there are some really strong groups around the top here, and there are some groups that are lower than that black bar underneath that line. And the other takeaway here is that the color coding, and it looks a bit colorful, I know, but there's some of every color pretty much below that black bar. So in each of these major portfolio areas, there's some really strong results, and there's some pockets where there's some lower results, and that's pretty normal for what we see. But an important takeaway when you're following up on results, because as I mentioned, it's not as much college-wide, although there are some things that need to be supported and done perhaps overall, but definitely some group level follow-up. So now I'm pulling up the same graph for work-life balance, and I'll go through it faster now that I've explained the first one and pull these up. So for work-life balance question, you see areas again underneath that curve, so to the right of the black bar, which is the average of Algonquin. Again, there's quite a few areas doing quite well around work-life balance, and I think workload was pretty strong too for things like risk management in a pandemic. So there's some good standout groups here for some of these measures, and then there's some areas where, in particular during a pandemic, we're seeing things like senior leaders, so president's offices, HR, those folks trying to manage some of the change and things going on during the pandemic do tend to have lower workload, work-life balance scores than some of the other groups. And so seeing some normal sort of results there in those areas. And we've got one more that way, which is overall morale. And I'll pull that up fairly quickly again. And there's a bit of a different relationship or result rather in the bottom here. So in terms of morale, there are some different groups that weren't over to the right in those first couple slides. Campus services, facilities, for example, showing up here now. So there are some different results around morale overall versus work-life balance versus workload, although those last two are fairly closely related. And so this just gives you the breadth, the idea that there's quite a lot of result and a lot of unpacking to be done, which I know the college is doing a good job setting up a process to do that and rolling out reports. And I think David's going to speak to that a little later on. We did ask some questions around working remotely. So for those, primarily, those surveyed were primarily actually working remotely, 79.9%, and mainly remained in their home position. And when asked so for people that reported working remotely, when asked what their preference would be and answered on a Likert scale, the biggest response was working remotely 1 to 2 days per week in the office. So that was the strongest response from those folks that are working remotely in terms of what they'd like to continue doing. And so a similar graph, this is morale again, by those VP areas that are going to be some color code, there's going to be some color coding. Not all had enough. So what we're showing now is the number of respondents in the bracket of folks that reported working remotely versus those who were working on site. And the black bar is the averages for how people feel morale, how morale was rated. So overall, at the college for people working remotely, they rated morale at 67% out of 100. People working on site overall rated morale at 64. And you can start to look at some of the differences. So just as a pattern, you see often, or for the most part, working on site has a lower bar than working remotely, except for example, in student services where that is an inverse relationship. It's not necessarily causal. So we're not saying that it's caused by either working remotely or working on site. Certainly not saying that, but there is something there to further unpack as well, where there are some levels. And so the college needed to be aware of this. We did ask things around for folks that are working remotely. Did you have the tools and resources you needed? And again, out of 100, so an average level of agreement or your score out of 100 was 75%. So that's a strong, primarily people in the agreement range of the scale for having the tools and resources they needed. This is a rank order here. So as you start to get down to the lower areas, things that were rated lowest around, okay, since working remotely, I have experience, better work-life balance. So these are the lower things that were rated, more time to focus on health and well-being, or wellness rather, and improved health, mental health. I want to pull up some other stats here though, because we do have the actual proportion of people in the agree range or disagree range. There were roughly around 55% in the agree range for work-life balance, but that means excluding the middle, that you got about 25% that disagree. So even though there are some groups, and I showed this already in one of those slides, where there's some strong groups in work-life balance, there are some areas that were lower, like President's Office, for example. But most important here, in research, it's called a bimodal split, but on these bottom two areas, there are almost as many in the disagree range as there are in the agree range for physical health and wellness and improved mental health. And where you see those low, that can lead to some things around, for example, how it impacts short and long-term absence and employee retention. So certainly some areas to look at and highly correlated with the pandemic. One more breakdown by all the areas for folks working remotely. Do they have the resources they needed? Again, pretty high scores here, but some areas that were a little bit low at the College, School of Business, Faculty of Health, Public Safety, and AC in the Ottawa and the Valley. So some campus. So some areas just starting to get a little bit lower. Nothing too bad, still quite a bit in the agreement range, but some areas where some attention could be diverted for resources for working remotely. So that takes us through the quantitative results. I'm going to pass it back to David to fill you guys in a little bit more around some of the open comments.
Good. Yeah. Thanks, Zach, for that walkthrough of our results. Yeah, we'll now turn our attention to the open-ended feedback. So there were a total of 3 open-ended questions from which we received responses in the thousands. As discussed by Zach at the outset, we take confidentiality serious and seek to maintain the anonymous nature of the survey. Therefore, I'm not showcasing the verbatims here at the town hall. But that being said, a member of the HR team and myself completed a coding of open-ended responses to identify the key themes and common answers by question. So starting with the first question, it asked, in your opinion, what do you feel Algonquin College has done well to support employees in response to COVID-19? The top 5 answers included effective communication, with respondents indicating that they were really effectively kept informed throughout the pandemic. Many respondents indicated that they felt that they had received adequate support and really appreciated the focus on safety. Technology was also a major theme, with many responses indicating that they were happy with the tools and applications provided by the college. Finally, many were pleased with the greater flexibility shown during the pandemic, most of which was tied to the opportunity to work remotely. Question 2 asked, what is the one thing Algonquin College can do better to support your well-being during this time? For this question, we see communication come up again, with respondents looking for more details, often at the departmental level. Many respondents wanted to see a greater focus on wellness and greater support on the emotional front. Workload was also raised as an issue, with many employees indicating that they were feeling like they were living at work and experiencing Zoom fatigue. Finally, there were questions about financial support for items such as home office and ergonomic support. Question 3, the last open-ended question asked, is there anything else you would like to share related to COVID-19 and your work at the college? Top responses included comments that the college has managed the pandemic quite well, followed by employees indicating that they'd like to see a continuation of remote working and delivery if possible in the future. This was tied to greater flexibility, more time with loved ones, reduction in commuting. These came out loud and clear in the comments. Additional comments included increased workload being experienced by employees. Employees also indicated that they were really missing interacting with peers and learners, really missing that social interaction that they would have with being on campus. Finally, there was feedback recommending that the college continue to invest in technology and tools to support remote work. So in summary, lots of great feedback here, great insight and themes for consideration and planning purposes. We'll now turn our attention to next steps and how the data will be put into action. So we'll go to the next slide. So there are a number of key steps that will be put into action, starting with step 1, and that involves the distribution of area departmental reports to Algonquin College leadership team members. The expectation is that ACLT will take the time to review and reflect on the results, and then move to step 2, which will involve sharing the report with the respective teams. Team meetings, huddles, one-on-ones will provide these great opportunities to share the report, focus in on those strengths, and have discussions on areas of improvement or focus. As you saw during the presentation, some teams will require different approaches and interventions. Hence, there is no one-size-fits-all. Fun, open, honest, and authentic discussions with their teams, the expectation is that actions will be discussed, prioritized, and implemented. I would also like to highlight that this report will be shared later this week on MyAC, as well as the employee engagement website. Finally, the data will provide valuable insights into the upcoming flex work arrangement policy, which is currently under development. In closing, I would like to thank Metrics at Work for their partnership, and most importantly, thank you, our employees, for taking the time to respond to this survey and participate in this town hall. Although the report is a snapshot in time, it really captures the pride, passion, resilience, and continued focus on learner experience that our employees bring day in and day out. It showcases what we've done well and where we can improve going forward, including a greater focus on workload and work-life balance. Once again, I appreciate your time and look forward to any questions that you may have. Thank you. And I think with that, I will scan the Q&A panel, and hopefully it's open and folks can now put forward any questions. Okay. I'm just monitoring the chat and the Q&A. I haven't seen anything come through, but please feel free to put forward any of your thoughts. Okay, now I'm seeing some stuff come through here. Okay, here we go. So when you say the results will be made available, will it be the full written report or today's PowerPoint? I would actually like to share both documents. There is a detailed report which has a lot of the data and metrics, and of course that's been provided by Metrics at Work. And of course, I think this PowerPoint does a great job summarizing the results from a high level as well as highlighting the next steps. So I will aim to share both this PowerPoint and the much larger file with global results on MyAC as well as on the employee engagement website. Good. Here's a question, Zach, for you here. It is, what was the percentage participation by other colleges? I'm thinking most likely with surveys conducted during the pandemic.
During the pandemic, it's 52%. So it's right around the same as what Algonquin got. Normally, our survey percentage rates are a little bit higher. Algonquin's full survey was 55. And I think we're around 58 or 60 in other colleges and universities pre-pandemic. So, but certainly during the last year, it's gone down, and so it's around 52%.
Good, thanks for that, Zach. And maybe we can stop sharing the PowerPoint there, and then I'll probably go into spotlight mode. So that's great. Another one coming in. What are the next steps for the college in terms of their response to mental health being a low score and focus area? For sure, I think this is an area that definitely is the increased workload, the complexity combined with Zoom fatigue is really it's providing a major challenge at the college. And as I mentioned earlier, there's no single solution on this front, but we need to really look at taking some steps for sure. And that's where it really, what I'm encouraging and recommending is to have those really robust discussions with your teams, and whether it's through one-on-one, the team meetings, the huddles, but really have those robust, authentic discussions to talk about workload, to talk about well-being, and other strategies. I know even in our team, we're looking at this, whether it's looking at walking meetings, trying other modes of communication, maybe even going back to the traditional phone. There's a tendency, I mentioned it earlier about Zoom fatigue. It's that feeling of always being in broadcast mode, even like it's like we're always on TV, but that takes a toll. And so having a discussion and maybe switching it up is a good thing to do. Also on the mental health and workload front, I know Fridays was typically a day where we were supposed to free time up. And so that's something definitely that I would encourage folks to do, and that would give dedicated working time. Starting meetings and discussions with things like a health, safety, wellness pauses is some of the tools and techniques that we've used as well. So some early thoughts and strategies that you may take back to your teams. But it all starts with a really good, robust discussion with between you, your peers, and your teams. And keeping going here. Okay, so I think I covered, I'm seeing a couple questions that are pretty similar. So I'm getting a couple questions on timelines for next steps. With the results now shared, what is the timeline for next steps? And I think in the past employee engagement survey back in 2019, it was very project management focused with timelines and reports. We're not taking that route on this one. We really want to defer to the ACLT team member to take the lead and really work with their respective teams to really review the data, reflect, discuss, ideate, and come up with strategies that each of the teams can then put in motion. From a timeline perspective, even with putting actions in place, you still want to factor capacity and all those pieces. So we didn't come out with a timeline per se, and we really defer to the ACLT members to take the lead on that and establish those time parameters through dialogue, through discussion with their team members. Okay.
David, may I assist you in this? And
yes.
I can perhaps read out some of the questions that are coming in so that you don't feel that you're answering them all. So how about if I read out the ones that have come in, and then we can share with Zach as well the answers. So this next question that I see is, can a memo be sent out to remind managers to complete performance reviews? There are multiple employees who haven't received one in years, as noticed in one of the support group meetings. The suggestion is this will help with an understanding of the workload.
Good, and I can take that one. Absolutely. Yeah, we're working right now on rolling out performance management engagement sessions with various stakeholders, and we will absolutely take this forward here and send out additional reminders here on the performance management front. Absolutely a critical step for folks to have that discussion with their team leaders and really not only reflect on the achievements and the accomplishments for the previous year, but also take a look at the future and what's coming up for the next fiscal. So more memos and information coming out in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for that question.
Thank you. The next question that we have in the Q&A is an area like the registrar's office broken down even further into the different sections that exist within the RO to display potential issues that may be occurring within the specific sections rather than the whole RO results as a whole? So perhaps David and Zach can take that one.
The results do break down further than what we showed in the slide deck, certainly, and we provided some additional reports through David.
Well, I just want to weigh into this. Of course, we'll need to ensure that we abide by the 10 individual responses as well to protect confidentiality. So we can slice and dice data, but utmost importance to be anchored on is that confidentiality piece. So just wanted to add that in.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Zach. Next question that we have is, will there be a special effort dedicated to HR? They seem to be in the most need of help. So I appreciate that question. I'm going to take this one. Following this town hall, we have a meeting set aside with our HR department to discuss our results of what we as individuals indicated through the Pulse survey of how we were feeling with the 20 questions that were provided. And then together, we will talk about our results and really look at what are some of the strategies that we can move forward. David had talked about earlier, and as did Zach, that different areas, depending on your results, will require some different interventions and different strategies. And so we're planning on a very concentrated effort on our results and what does that mean to us, and especially with the workload and capacity issues, considering the year that we've all gone through. And HR, certainly helped supported people through this. It was a difficult year, and we are really all intending on focusing on those results and how do we move that forward. So yes, we are definitely looking to help support our employees in HR. Our next question. Oh, sorry, David, did you want to add to that? Pardon me before
No, that's great. Exactly what I would have said. Thank you.
Okay. The next question that we have is the information regarding preferences for work at home, hybrid, or other choices is of interest, but I didn't understand the percentages shared. Is it possible to select more than one option? And thank you for sharing that important information. So over to you, David.
Yeah, so this was, actually, I know Zach and we talked about it the other day. This was a question that had several different options, and we applied a Likert scale to it. Hence, you saw the different percentages, and you can see how the top choice for sure, based on preference and according to the Likert, was really that hybrid work from home 1 or 2 days and then come into the office for 2 or 3 days and vice versa. But Zach, I'll turn it over to you. This was how it was configured, the question type, and maybe you can explain that in a bit more detail.
Exactly. It wasn't just those options that were a choice. As David said, each option had also how much agreement that people would respond to in terms of clicking a bubble. So those percentages were the average levels of agreement. So most people agree that that's the one that they wanted to choose, or their highest preference rather, for going forward.
Thank you. Our next question is, thank you for discussing and sharing the survey results. In next steps, when will we see the plans about how Algonquin College will continue supporting employees and improving conditions, for example, around workload? So I can start this response, and then perhaps David, you can share. And this may also be something that we'll want to take up in the broader conversation with our colleagues, with our executive team colleagues. But for an initial response, certainly, as David had mentioned in one of the slides, we will be distributing, and I believe it was later on this afternoon, or perhaps they already have it, to the ACLT leadership team so that they receive their own information, and then they're starting to absorbing and discussing it. So within each area, they will be looking at what their results are and saying, okay, how do we impact this within our teams? So David, you perhaps have some more specific examples on that.
Yeah, no, that's just it. I think to my earlier comments, when it comes to workload, once again, really encouraging folks to work with their respective teams. We talked about performance management earlier and setting objectives, and for folks that were at the board meeting earlier this week, we're trying to get really precise and have flexible objectives, and that's obviously tied into workload. But at the end of the day, once again, it's really about having those authentic discussions, making it safe and opening up, and really having good dialogue and trying to find ways to address both the workload and the well-being piece. And it's going to be through dialogue and different types of approaches that we'll start to see improvement.
Thanks for that. Our next question in the Q&A is, would you say the results on working from home are typical of what you are seeing in having companies work from home for 1 year plus? So Zach, perhaps you can take this.
Thank you. Right on par. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're seeing trends that preferences to continue working from home. Things like, what are you experiencing? Things like reduced work-life balance, or work-life balance being, rated low among all those other options that you might experience while working remotely, is common. And I think in line with, having school-age children at home and all that sort of thing that people are dealing with. And then looking at mental health in particular, and physical health and well-being. Those two things are tending to be low in all of our types of surveys like this.
Thank you. Thank you for that question and that answer. David, maybe you can take this one. When you say next steps, what are you looking at for timelines? Weeks, months, years is the question.
Yeah, no, and I get the preference to have timelines, but for sure, I factoring at what's on everybody's plate, and there's a lot. I would like to see some activity on this, definitely over the next 3 months for sure. I think that's fair. Some teams may be able to move quicker than others, and some may need a bit more time to, flush out and have those really robust discussions and come up with strategies and pilots or whatever, whatever they think might help to move the bar and improve the employee engagement and overall employee experience. So if it was asked and put on point here to throw out a time, I think 3 months is reasonable. But once again, I would defer back to the ACLT member to work with their teams, get a pulse on the capacity, A, to have these discussions, and B, to apply corrective action, and just be open and transparent in that discussion. But 3 months seems, I think, would be a reasonable time frame.
Thanks, David, for that answer. This next question is directed to Chris Jensen. So while I'm reading it, perhaps Chris, if you wouldn't mind coming on screen, thank you. And I'll read it through, and then perhaps we can turn it over to you for an answer. So this question links to mental health and work-life balance. And it is as follows. As fall of 2021 SWIFTs are being discussed, there is a concern expressed about the proposed increases in class sizes being seen within remotely taught classes. Charlene, who had posed the question, had addressed this to Chris to discuss this non-student-centered approach, which creates more barriers for students to engage in learning, potential increases in mental health concerns, both from student and staff perspective, and less ability to manage work-life balance. There seems to be more pressure on students as well. At a previous town hall in 2020, Chris had reassured us that remote classes would not be an increase to a rate that would or could not be done in face-to-face classes. And then related to this question, are managers being given directions to reduce sections of courses running and increase remote class sizes? So there is a lot to unpack in that. Chris, I do turn it over to you to walk through some of that.
Yes, Diane, you're right. There is a lot to unpack there. Thank you, Charlene. Lots of good stuff to talk about. I'll try not to take the rest of the time answering the multiple facets of this. Let me start with the easy piece last. Our managers being given direction to reduce sections, reduce numbers of sections of courses running, and increase remote class size. Absolutely not. That has not been a direction. The conversations after the last town hall that you're referencing, the conversations that I had with my team of deans was really to ensure that we did not simply randomly decide, oh, look, we have an opportunity, let's increase class sizes. It's not as simple as a one size fits all. I am aware of some sections, not a large number, but I am aware of some small number of sections of theory classes that did increase the theory size. But I am not aware of any widespread. There was never any direction. We are a learner-driven institution, but what is best for students it is more complicated than simply looking only at class sizes. I agree that in times of remote delivery, with a fair bit of the delivery being done through Zoom, that section size is an important consideration in the quality of learning experience for the students. And I would expect that those conversations happen between faculties, coordinators, and chairs to make appropriate decisions that balance all of the factors that go into deciding what a section size should be. So really the short answer to your question, to sum it up best, let me reiterate that last question again. There is no direction to increase section sizes. Likewise, there is no direction to not increase section sizes, but to not do it without a decided reasoning behind it that is not merely a financial decision.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you jumping on. Thanks for that. So the next question is, was there a difference between faculty and support responses? They have very different experiences in this remote world. Zach, perhaps you can start with that answer.
Yeah, there were certainly some differences. And without going into sort of the nitty gritty, I guess, there were some lower scores and some faculty results than some of the other admin or support service areas, for example. With communication and workload in particular. So there was a couple where communication sort of comes in a little bit more than just work-life balance, for example. So there were some extra things that we're seeing in the academic results in general, anyways, if I could just respond that way.
Thank you. David, did you have any comments on that, or is that?
No, that does
answer?
align, and we have pulled multiple reports on this front, right, Zach, to actually have the separate views, and that's where there's a wealth of data here, really from a comparative analysis perspective for sure. So we do have separate reporting elements on that front as well, so it's good for insights.
Thanks, David. Our next question is from Jeff Agate. I noticed some schools and areas consistently presented low scores in a number of key indicators. Are there any plans to flow support to those areas to help get their heads back above water? So I'll take that answer. Certainly, I'm going to speak from a human resources perspective from ours. What I'm looking at, again, as I've mentioned, is to debrief with our team, looking at the results in detail, and then advocating. So if we start looking at, okay, it's a capacity issue, well then how do we fill any current vacancies that we have? How do we make sure that we have our capacity shored up? Is there service level agreements that we need to start examining in this crazy time. So what are some of the concrete actionable things that we can start putting in place as a team, and looking and really understanding what the supports are. So that's how I'm approaching it. But you're right, there are some other areas that perhaps they have other different sore points that they have to address. And it's really those fulsome conversations about, what does this data mean? What are we highlighting? What are our pain points? And then how do we solve them? And so there might be different solutions for the different areas, but it's important upon all of us to make sure that we're listening to these results and that we're acting on them. Next question is, will there be a post-pandemic analysis of the value of flexible work schedules, as I feel the pandemic may impact some of the results? Great question, actually. I will take this. Certainly, as we're starting to work through, well, I shouldn't say starting to work through, there has been significant work done on the flexible work policy, and then what does that mean for a steady state? We had intended the flexible work policy to be put in place for when this was all over. And we've been talking about that at town halls and providing communiques on that to say this is a future state. But, like anything, we're learning through the pandemic and what the results are. And we had promised to everyone to say, we want to hear from you about what your results, what you felt during the pandemic about the remote working. And so how, as we started to incorporate that feedback into some of our thinking, our current thinking on a different type of work model post-pandemic would certainly be learner-driven, employer-defined, and employee-informed. And what I mean by that is the information that you are giving us during this result, and then perhaps in a future state where we continue to test these things, will be incredibly important in how we roll out some of these future state schedules. And what does it look like? But again, I want to emphasize that it'll all be learner driven. So how we roll out our fall 21 term, how we roll out the winter of 22 term, and what it means for our learners will then mean, what's the forum that we surround that function? What does our organizational design look like? Do we have positions that continue offsite? Do we have positions that, now that our learners are back on site, that we need to be back on site? What does that mean for us? So it'll all be service driven. And I think some of the input that we receive from this particular pulse survey helps us inform that. But you're right that there still needs to be that continued analysis of, as we continue to move through. And we've started to the idea of piloting this idea, piloting the flexible work schedules and work arrangements as we continue to roll out our different like fall and winter, and what does that look like? We may surround that with these new structures in a pilot form. So that's our current thinking, but certainly a post-pandemic analysis of it is key to help defining and further enhancing what our future state would look like. So I hope that answers your question. The next question is, will there be particular consultations held for areas which consistently scored in the bottom 5 or so for morale balance? David, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, no, for sure. And as Zach showed on the comparative analysis screens, there's definitely some departments and divisions that definitely need focus. It starts with what Diane mentioned earlier, really reviewing the results, reflecting, pausing, reflecting, having that dialogue discussion with your teams. As Diane mentioned, even in our group, we're going to chat this afternoon. And they're going to be tough conversations. They're really going to be looking in the mirror, really reflecting and trying to figure out, how can we improve? What do we need to change? And so, yeah, that's really it. It's from a consultation perspective. This is once again where we're really hoping ACLT members with maybe some of those in those challenging areas for sure can think outside the box. And even maybe potentially reach out to HR for support and advisement as well. But for sure, I think step one is just starting with that open discussion, reviewing the results, and seeing from the employees themselves, what are some corrective actions we can do? What are things we need to change up to improve overall employee experience and engagement?
Thanks, David. The next question that we have is, will the open-ended responses, while the open-ended responses were kept private for this presentation, will the college be able to see the suggestions and comments as they were written by the respondents? David?
Yeah, so this is one that, as I mentioned, the responses are in the thousands. And I am very, as Zach mentioned too, we really want to protect the confidentiality, the anonymous nature of those results. I'll take this back because to go down that path of sharing verbatims is tricky. It requires scrubbing. It requires a lot of focus to get it to the sharing level. That being said, I would lean on the fact that we've done a coding activity, which is really, once again, highlighted the top 5 focus areas, and from there we'll really be able to hone in on those different strategies tied to those key themes. So I'm going to have to just do a bit more research on that one and maybe look at some past practice. But at this point, I'm hesitant just because I really want to protect that anonymous nature of the survey and the individual respondents' confidentiality. So I'm gonna do a bit more homework on this one.
Thanks, David. The next question is, it seems like pretty positive numbers across the board. What is risk management doing so right that puts them in the high numbers? And I actually don't have that answer, and I don't think David or Zach would. Perhaps that's something that, from a best practice perspective, that we can learn from those that have. Oh, Colin's on. Colin, did you want to say a word?
I certainly can. I guess I don't necessarily know the full answer to that, but I think risk management is in a special place right now with our response to COVID and our role with the college in that response. Many of our areas are certainly tuned to be tracking well. When we're in this sort of response mode, and although this response mode has lasted so long, I think it certainly does help to really engage many members of our team. And that would be my first sort of comment on that. But certainly we'll be taking the results back, as everyone else will, and looking at them to understand what we're doing well and where we also need to make improvements. So.
Thanks, Colin, for jumping in. Appreciate that. It's always good to share best practices. And let's see. Sorry, the screen's just moved around for me here, so I'm not sure which ones we've responded to. Let me just go down. David, do you see the next question? I've had it moved. Sorry.
Yeah, I have one here. It's, will faculty areas, departments be able to see survey results in more detail, including the comments? So for sure, we have produced departmental area specific reports, and those have been shared with ACLT members. Of course, those will, the expectation is that it will absolutely be shared and folks will get a walkthrough. And as I mentioned earlier, we have opportunities to further slice and segment the data. So we've done cuts by different groups. A good example might be deans and chairs, ACLT, as Diane mentioned. So more to come, and they have been provided to ACLT members, and more discussions to come and sharing of those results with you.
Thanks. Our next question, I've gotten back to where the questions are. Can you share how Algonquin College compares to other Ontario colleges? Zach, could you take that one?
Yeah, well, just on those, again, it's a pulse survey, so we didn't ask a lot of questions. That was one thing I didn't get to enforce or repeat, I think, but that's something to keep in mind on those questions asked. We did show some comparisons. One of my earlier slides that showed job engagement, department organizational engagement, and the was it orange or was it green? I think it was orange. The bar, your results were higher on all the things that we measured, in particular engagement, which is a really strong thing to see. So organizational engagement went up a lot compared to the previous survey and was actually quite a bit higher than our database. Just workload, work-life balance was right. It was exactly the same as our database. So I mean, we're seeing Algonquin looking high on everything. And I think I mentioned in some previous presentations that these are some of the highest results we've seen in a college pulse survey, actually. So just as a takeaway, it's a pulse. It didn't ask everything we could possibly want to ask, but the results were really strong in terms of engagement, and some low results in pockets, and with some particular issues around drivers like workload, work-life balance.
Thanks, Zach. The next question is, yesterday on a webinar, I heard that large enterprises such as Alphabet and Google are seeing a drop in productivity and are making plans to return some employees to the office locations for some portion of the work week. Do you see this as a possibility affecting morale for good or bad? David, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. We're having discussions with various stakeholders on this front for sure. Telework has been a strategy implemented for many years. We've seen it at, like as mentioned, Google, Yahoo, etc. And so, this is something for me, for sure, something that, I'm reflecting on. How does it impact culture? How does it impact relationships? How do we lead and manage? How do we build trust in a remote type setting? And so I don't have the answer per se at this point in precision, but I'll tell you this, COVID-19 has really resulted in one of the largest work experiments of our time, for sure. And, we're learning as we go here and adapting incredible resilience and adaptation. Based on the feedback and insights we received from the survey, what I'm seeing is folks really love flexibility from working from home. They really like that. More opportunity, as I mentioned, with loved ones, less of a commute, more productivity, actually, but they're still craving that social interaction. And even myself, not having been on campus, as someone who's been here, 4 months and change here, I'd really love to get back on campus and interact with peers and learners. But yeah, and I think that's where we're going to land is really potentially a mix in the middle, and that's what the literature is showing, which is more of we call it a hybrid type work model, and that terminology may change. It's always it seems to be changing a little bit here or there, but that's where we'll land potentially, where we may once again see folks 2-3 days from home, 2 days at work, and that is really a game changer of how we work, how we ideate. What does the space need to look like? Do we need ideation centers versus cubicles? And it really needs a lot of thought, a lot of strategic lens put on that to see what that future state may look like, what it looks like in a steady state. And as Diane mentioned too, I'm a big fan of proof of concepts and pilots. This is where I think I'd love to see us get ahead and try to pilot different approaches to see what's most effective for us, for the college, because I know what folks, other companies have for sure, but we need a solution that is really catered towards our college and our setting, anchored on our learners and their experience. So a great question, and it's one that's I don't want to say keeping me up at night, but it's one I'm thinking about a lot, for sure, and with other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, David. The next question that we have is from Annette Boozy. Thanks for this information. There are a number of areas that have been exposed as concerning, including human resources, which oversee and manage every aspect of the way every employee engages with the college as our employer. What tangible and action-oriented steps is the college going to take to change this? And again, Annette, thank you so much for this question. This is something that is going to be continuing to be on my mind, and I'm going to be keeping this very active. In addition to it being for the whole college, as I turn my focus on my team and to say, what can we be doing differently? And as I'd mentioned before, we need to ensure that we have our capacity, all of our positions filled. We need that. We need to be able to perhaps start setting some expectations, the service level expectations, as this has been such a crazy year where everything was on fire. Like, how do we start changing that pace? How do we start working with that? And these are the things that, from a tangible, action-oriented step, that we will be co-creating with our team in human resources, so that we see those concrete steps and that we start putting things in place. But I do thank you for that question. It's something that will be keeping me and my management team up at night, as well as I'm sure all of my colleagues in HR. The next question is from Valerie Hill. In the qualitative, the results indicated communication as a strength, but also an area of improvement. Can you provide some more detail on this, David, and then perhaps Zach can also add in?
Yeah, I know for sure. I think globally, for sure, what came out loud and clear in the results is that we really did a great job communicating regarding the pandemic, the various statuses. Colin and team and the communications teams really stepped up, and that came out loud and clear. Where we saw communication come up, and that was that open-ended question too, is really, I think, more specific communication really tied to departmental specific processes and updates, and that came out in a few spots. That was really what popped up, more of a departmental focus in question two. Maybe I'll go to Zach. I know you had a chance to peruse the data as well. Any other highlights or thoughts from your perspective?
I just think in that relationship, it is very interesting. So it was like doing a good job about pandemic related communications. And then there were also some extra things. So on the second question was more job related, which I think, David, you're speaking to in the departments. And so when communication was suggested to be improved, it was more related to work and job related.
Thanks. Our next question is, how will the departments share best practices between each other? David, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, great question here. And I think this is where we have an opportunity through ACLT and to really tap into that group. And I would encourage too, as folks try out new techniques and strategies, to share those with ACLT and of course, sharing with HR as well. I think we need to, HR can be definitely a keeper potentially of these best practices and replicate across other groups. As Zach mentioned, we saw the comparative analytics. We saw some teams really scoring high across, a lot of those categories. What can we learn from them? What strategies, as Colin mentioned, are they leveraging that can be shared across all groups so that we can benefit from? So more to come. This is an ongoing journey here. I think the good point here is we have a data set. It's a snapshot in time, but now it's about actioning it and strategizing in discussions with our employees. So I love that idea of sharing best practices, and I'll definitely keep that front and center as we proceed. Thank you.
Our next question is, thank you for this presentation. How do you account for scores when the sampling in some areas, such as Perth, are quite a bit smaller than other areas? Zach, perhaps you can take that.
Right. We're advocating to use the results regardless of response rate in most cases, the average response rate being 51. But you're right, there are differences in certain groups. And so we're not doing sort of statistical testing or trying to validate the results. The result is what it is, or the response rather is what it is. Where you've got enough, if you've got more than 10 and can get a report, because there are lots and lots of even departments that didn't make that minimum threshold of 10. So if there's 10 or more, and even if that's 35 to 40% response rate, we're advocating that those results are a voice of the employees and worth using to start discussions. So as I've said already, it's a pulse survey. We didn't ask everything. You don't get all the answers out of it. You get some pointers around what's low and what's going on, and the rest is left to some of the discussions that happen afterwards, which is a lot of what David and Diane are talking about. So I think it's enough to start the discussions, and there's if validating those results in those discussions is very key.
Thanks. I see we have a hand up. Ron, over to you for your question.
Hi, Segu Arguegu, Deganadasa Niangat. So my traditional name is Deganadasa. I serve as the Vice President, Truth, Reconciliation, and Indigenization, and my English name is Ron McCluster. I don't really have a question so much as a supporting comment. The college as an entity has placed a great amount of importance on indigenization, reconciliation, and decolonization. And from the indigenization perspective, the way that we currently use tools like this enables or disables areas like mine to be highlighted because our population size is so small. And so I just wanted the community to know that we've had discussions about how to come at this work a little bit different, when it comes to smaller population sizes. My concern is a little bit different. I would like to know if the way in which we are approaching our work, specifically from an indigenization perspective, how that scores. But I just wanted to affirm that these questions are being debated from a number of perspectives, and so I just felt the need to share that.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate you jumping in. I have another question here. It says, in terms of performance management, Human Resources has told us that the function is not ready in Workday, so we cannot do them for our teams. David, perhaps you can speak to that.
For sure. Yes, that is correct. Workday at this point is not being leveraged for the performance management process. That being said, it is absolutely as part of our future plans and talent strategy, something that we're going to be taking a look at for sure, and it'll be part of the business plan. That being said, we do have tools and templates that the expectation are to be adopted. And so if you don't have access to that, please encourage you to have a discussion with your team leader. And folks, of course, can also reach out to the talent advisor if they do need the latest template for both 2020, 2021 fiscal year, which folks should be closing off, as well as for the new fiscal year performance management process. Thank you.
Thanks, David. The next question that we have is, do you know how different groups like BIPOC or LGBT, answered? Is there a difference for these groups? David, over to you.
Sure, and I may defer to Zach too here a little bit, but at this point, no, the survey, once again, confidentially paramount. We did not have what I would call front end or tombstone database questions to solicit these responses. So the answer is no at this time in collection of that data. Zach, I know from your experience, you're working with multiple colleges. Are you seeing maybe an equity data element included in surveys? And I know once in confidentiality, the employment equity census, that all plays into scope into this. But I'm just seeing if you see any colleges and what they're doing, other colleges and what they're doing on this front.
Absolutely. Not normally in a pulse survey. So more equity and more inclusivity questions, total D&I or demographic census even are being added to a lot of full surveys, and then asking more inclusivity questions so you can look at the various groups and their responses. So we didn't get into a lot of that in this pulse survey. And as I said, colleges and universities haven't needed to do that, but they are asking those questions. And we do have results even by your pulse survey for that one group, for example, non-binary, reported. I think it's in the overall results too. Even there's sort of an appendix in the back that does kind of give those scores, just overall high level. Anyways, but yeah, we could be doing more in the future. Maybe an next full survey, adding some extra questions too.
Thank you. Our next question is kind of a drill down of something that we've already talked about, but perhaps we can continue to answer and expand on it. I understand the issue was with not identifying staff and the results of the survey. But what if a department is very small, only 2 to 5 support staff, for example? Does this mean that our data will not be considered or looked at? David?
Yeah, no, good question. Once again, when you go to that level of granularity, that's where there's potential, you're trending on that line of confidentiality and anonymous nature. That's what makes it a challenge. We went with the 10 or more because that really protects the nature of the respondent. So yeah, at this place, at this point, really, it'll be included as part of a larger set of results. And I think that there's still value in that and looking at the data and still having those robust discussions. And it doesn't stop folks from raising issues they see from their own perspectives and lived experiences, and raising that through team meetings, huddles, and one-on-ones with their people leaders. So I'm really, once again, a big focus on confidentiality and making this survey anonymous and safe for folks to put forward their feedback. That's why we're really careful on this front. Zach, I know you got a lot of experience on this one too, and you guys have been doing this for decades. The 10 or more is really the way to go. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, exactly what you've said, I think, David. And the issue is too, when you've got some groups, even a group of 10 or 11, but 4 or 5 responded. It's a double-edged sword. It's very difficult. We want to get the results to people so you can use them, but at the same time protect anonymity. So the best place to bring it back up is in those discussions. So if you're validating results, and if it's of an overall group that maybe you report into as a group of 11, but only got 5 responses or 4, have those discussions in your teams and bring that up and bring your team experience into that upper level discussion is sort of the best balance right now anyway.
Thank you. I did skip over one by accident, so I'll go back to it. Does the college have a strategy to guard against social isolation of employees as remote learning continues? Don't know, David, if you wanted to tackle that. I mean, certainly when I think about all the wellness strategies that we are talking about and putting in place with our wellness and abilities team through the work of the psychological health and safety committee, as well as all of the strategies to support our learners, there is a whole series of interventions and resources that are available. That's what I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's great. I absolutely encourage folks to access the resources that we've made available on this front. That being said, even myself, I'm very used to management by walking around, and that's something I would do on a daily basis. I would submit to folks that you can still do that virtually. So encourage, and that's using the tools, whether it's Teams, Zoom, chat, text, but reach out to your employees. Try, do skip levels and really try to take that time or moments to just reach out and just, often our tendency is like, I'm after a deliverable or looking to get a status update, but just check in with each other, see how folks are doing, make that connection, really be in an active listening mode. But yeah, I would encourage, once again, managed by working around can be done virtually, and encourage folks to use the tools for sure to do it.
Thank you. Our next question is, says, my apologies if I missed this earlier. Curious to know what the breakdown was by faculty, admin, and support staff. And I'm reading into this question about responses. What was the percentage breakdown?
Yeah, we've got that. Just look it up. We're going to go to that slide. Absolutely. So academic, if I've got this right, academic, admin, and support staff, academic was 50.2% response rate. Support staff was 36% response rate. Administration was 13.2% response rate. And actually, I'm going to duck out. David, is that okay? Just as a heads up, because I'm going on to a different meeting.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for your time. We have reached your time that you had allocated with us, so we appreciate that. I will just keep going with some of the questions until my my co-panelists tell me not to. But thank you, Zach, for that. The next is a comment more than a question. The comment is that it is sad to see that Human Resources ranking the lowest for this pulse survey. It is the department that is there to help with the issues that we are struggling with the most, and hope things that can things can be improved soon. So thank you for that comment, and I completely concur. The next is a question. It can be difficult for part-time staff to secure enough to have, to feel secure enough to have the authentic conversations that we're suggesting. Are there any protections suggested in place to allow these conversations to be fully authentic? David, initial thoughts?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. Thank you for this. I think it needs to be unpacked a little bit. Yeah, and safe space, establishing safe space, it takes time, it takes focus, and I've had opportunities to see it in action in previous lives for sure. But it's setting those ground rules. What are our safe space principles and guidelines, and having that discussion on what that looks like with your employees and having that dialogue. And then through there, and once again, it doesn't happen overnight. This takes time. It takes trust building. It's about relationships. And that's what I would encourage folks to do is, once again, it's about the relationship, right? And it's about trust. So, and it all starts with good dialogue and establishing safe space principles and guidelines is definitely a key step. And of course, finding those times and moments to have those discussions as well. So that's what I'd lead with right now. Diana, if you have any additional thoughts on that one, but it's a great question.
Thanks. The next one is a really interesting question as well. And is there a way to track responses from employees with multiple roles? Like, for example, support staff also having an academic role at the same time. From this person's experience, they could have answered the questions differently, depending on which role that they were thinking of for those questions. I'm not sure if there's a way to track primary and secondary roles and the responses, but David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know that gets, yeah. So we work with Zach, and we take a snapshot in time on Workday, and we get a unique identifier for sure. Once again, we're blinded from the survey result coming back, but we take that primary role as the main one. It's an interesting question, and it could be flushed out maybe with another parameter in the survey itself for future ones. But at this point, we really hone in on that one, on that primary role as the main source for the response.
Thank you. The next is a question that says, why is there a hesitancy to openly acknowledge the lower scores and areas for growth? Survey presentations need to be unbiased. Thank you for that. I do believe that the presentation had both. David, your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. And we're sharing, the results. We saw the comparative analytics, and, globally, the college has had tremendous, really solid results. But as we discussed earlier, there's departments that definitely need a specific strategy and discussions and dialogue and action plans to move the bar. So I would push back on this question a little bit and submit that no, we came and showed the data. We're being transparent and honest with the results, and I think that was clearly shown in a lot of the comparative slides that were showcased by Zach.
Thanks, David. The next question, I'm actually going to ask Claude to weigh in. So if you don't mind, Claude, the question is as follows. Do the results surprise leadership, or do they confirm possible assumptions?
Well, I was going to save that remark for when I was going to take over the town hall, but I'll just give a quick capsule, if you wish. It was surprised, but positively surprised. I was expecting, given the situation and circumstances that we're all experiencing right now, to have more muted results. But what the results have really shown us here is great response rate, great job engagement responses, as well as organizational engagement, well above the mean. And Zach said it not once, twice. And I think what you've repeated, David, is that, it's not a glass is half full, the glass is 3/4 full. And it's interesting that I know it's so Canadian. At times we focus on that 1/4 and say, well, the glass is not entirely full. man, there's a lot to celebrate here. So surprised, yes, positively surprised. So not denying there are not areas to focus on. Absolutely, there's always areas to improve. We have a spirit of continuous improvement, and darn gosh it, we're going to focus on that as well. But let's take a moment to celebrate the great results we've seen here. And I may repeat some of that in the next few minutes when I take over. But anyway, that was going to be my segue into the next segment of the town hall.
So if you can give me a flag, Claude, as to when you would like that. There is approximately 14 questions left. Some are duplicates of what we have heard already. So I can try to skip, at least reference them and then skip over them.
Yeah, let's do one more. And then,
okay.
Yeah, we'll go to the next segment of our town hall.
Okay, so the next one will be, if we are fully vaccinated, can we start to return to campus this fall, especially if we are in a support service? This fall has been a busy term. It is so hard to work in isolation. I have not enjoyed working from home. This isolation is very hard. Colin, I'm not sure if you wanted to open your screen and your video and speak to that.
Thanks, Diane. I can certainly speak to the first part of that anyway, and perhaps less at an individual level than a broad perspective on it. Vaccines are extremely important, and the effect of more and more of our local population getting vaccines influences what the public health requirements will be for the college in the fall. And it's really, the college is responding to and managing the public health requirements and how they impact our operations. So what we have on campus in the fall is largely determined by those public health requirements. So I would say in a broad sense, if the entire community can get behind vaccines, the more likely it is that we will have a relaxation of those public health protocols that will allow us to get back to business more normally sooner. So that's the piece on the vaccines. And as far as isolation is concerned, it is difficult for everyone working this way. And I would only encourage anyone who has particular challenges with that to rely on the resources and the programs that have been identified already and that HR has put in place to help support our people through this.
Thanks, Colin. I believe that was the last question that we are taking just on the pulse survey. And if that's the case, I'll turn it back over to Claude.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much to David and Zach for presenting. I know Zach has left, but I know you'll convey on my behalf and everyone's behalf the commendable work that Metrics at Work has done to conduct a survey, analyze the results, and present those results to us today. And thank you, David, for answering many of the questions, and for Diane to help out as well and help him see this segment of our town hall. Clearly, as I said, this is a challenging period that we're all going through. We do acknowledge this. We continue to experience this. Many of us thought a year ago we'd be done by now. The reality is that although we see light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccinations that are ramping up and how the vaccination is positively impacting the populations that are getting vaccinated. I remind everyone, elder care used to be in the news an awful lot. And now that both the seniors have been vaccinated and their caregiver, we're seeing much, much better results in our elder care. So that gives us hope for the rest of the population. Once we get vaccinated, we're going to see a return to pre-pandemic levels. So, for the meantime, we ask everybody to respect our public health guidelines, our stay-at-home orders, and go through the reopening framework that will allow us to get through this time period and return to the operations that we all want to. What I want to say is that, and as I said a minute ago when I answered the question that Diane put to me, is I'm very pleased with the overall results, both in terms, as I said, of the participation rate, the response rate, and the strong results that we've demonstrated specifically around job and organizational engagement. And also recognizing that the survey results also point to some areas that we need to pay attention to, where improvements need to be made, especially around work distribution and work-life balance, and specifically wellness support, resources, and things that will allow us to feel that we're balancing what's happening at home, what's happening at work. The results, as Zach mentioned, also are really significant. They're noteworthy statistically across their database, and we should really be proud of them and take time to celebrate, and also take action on those points where improvements are needed. So that's my segue. Normally in our town hall, we always start with a highlight of a success story, and we have many, and I know those will be placed by our events team in the chat. But this particular one that we just spent the majority of the town hall on is one success story that is worth noting, and we spent considerable time this morning discussing. So we'll now turn to our overall town hall Q&A, and I will introduce the rest of the panel who will be joining me to answer questions that you may have. And we'll start with Mark Savinkoff, our Vice President of Advancement, Chris Jansen, Senior Vice President Academic, Dwayne McNair, Vice President Finance Administration, Dan McCutcheon, Vice President Human Resources, Laura Stanbrough, Vice President Student Services, Tracy McDougall, Director of President's Office in Communication, Ron McLester, Vice President Truth, Reconciliation, and Indigenization, and Colin Benang, Director of Risk Management. So these are our panel this morning. And again, remind everyone, you can ask your question in a number of ways. You can ask your question by raising your hand, and I've got my attendee list going here. There we go. I'll be able to see who puts their hand up, and I will, if I see a hand that's up, I will call out your name. You will have to unmute yourself, and then you can pose your question and chat with the panel members. Alternatively, you can continue using the Q&A chat box that you have been using since the town hall started on the pulse survey results, and you type in your questions. I will read it out loud, and then one of our experts will raise the answer. If you're watching on YouTube as well, you can put in your question in the chat on YouTube, and our events team will relay that to me. First, we had a question that was pre-submitted in advance of the town hall. I will read it, and then I will turn a question to Chris Jensen and perhaps Laura Sandbrough for an answer. So the question is, for programs running virtually where classroom space scheduling is not an issue, a 9 a.m. start removes some barriers for students who are parents. Can this be the policy for fall or until we return to on-campus delivery? So Chris.
Thank you, Claude. Laura, did you want to start that answer and me follow, or do you want me to start and you follow? It was sort of a tag team as we worked through this.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for submitting it in advance. We did have the opportunity to quickly assess with our scheduling team, and it definitely is possible. And we actually put it on the executive team agenda to talk about as a broader, what are the consequences? What's the domino effect of doing that broadly for the fall? So I think it's a great learner-centric question that we're definitely going to look into next week to see what is possible, and then communicate that once we've had an opportunity to make sure we've thought through all the cascading pieces.
And the mechanism by which that would happen, again, note that there are times that scheduling won't allow that to happen. So it's not a, yes, we're going to always do this, but we are actively exploring the possibility of, well, the process by which we could do this on a regular basis within the confines of what's possible by scheduling. So, great idea.
All right, thank you both, Chris and Laura. I will go to a live question now. I have Judy Purett. So Judy, if you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. Good morning, Claude and panel. I had a quick question concerning reach outs that we've had from various faculty members about heavy workloads this spring on the heels of a very difficult year for everybody. Absolutely, everybody. We have had several faculty who have reached out and are really concerned about when they will be able to do traditional springtime renewal given their heavy workloads. So, you know, we have a situation where we have faculty members, some of them have been scheduled to start their annual leave on Monday when our grades are due, some Tuesday, some Wednesday, and they're coming back to start teaching on the 5th of July. So they had sort of 4 days, some of them 5 days to prepare. Some of them don't have handover time. And in between, there are questions where they're wondering, when do we get to do those things like renew our course, read up and catch up on educational trends, pedagogical matters, supporting learners, considering alternate resources. So I'm just wondering what the college might be doing in terms of the heavy workloads and faculty renewal.
All right, thank you very much, Judy. Chris, I'll turn this one over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Judy. I acknowledge that we are still in a period of adjustment to the 14-week term and switching faculty for 35 weeks of teaching a year. Last summer was supposed to be our first full summer of that process. And of course, the pandemic threw a major spanner into that whole process. And I would not in any way, shape, or form say we are at a steady state approach to this right yet. We are still learning. We are still improving and making adjustments to the process. And that said, it's difficult. It's a difficult year. There are PD days. There are that are part of the collective agreement. There are other non-teaching periods, and it needs to be an adjustment, and there needs to be a conversation. And the question is it a significant change to a course? Is it regular updating? These are conversations that need to happen with chairs, but we're still learning. I'm sorry. I completely lost my train of thought. I went in a left-hand direction on that. My apologies. We'll call that a senior moment, if you will. So I acknowledge that this is a difficult time, a difficult challenge. The handoff between front half and back half of a term is also still something we are working at. We are still in the process of adjusting the amount of teaching that happens across the 3 terms. And the pandemic is by absolute means an exacerbating factor as we try to learn how to do all of this. So the SWIFts that are developed for full-time faculty, the work that other than full-time faculty are given, again, that's the mechanism by which we have to add work to acknowledge work. If there are other circumstances that make it unusual, we need to have that conversation with the chair. And beyond that, I think I'll stop there.
You mean between the faculty member and the chair?
Correct.
I appreciate the answer that you just gave, Chris. My concern is sort of on a bigger level, and that is the equity that happens across departments and how the SWIFTs are generally handled. So you're suggesting that individual faculty members should be speaking with their chairs, and I would say from what we have seen in terms of messages that have come in through the local with questions about SWIFTs and about how workload is assigned, there is this sense that, well, look, you're under your allotted hours, so I can give you 3 different preps here in the summertime because you aren't even near the 40 hours yet, and not near. It might be 38 hours, it might be 34 hours. And I guess what I'm saying is that there is a mechanism, you're quite right. The SWIFT is a mechanism to capture how workload is handled. And we're just seeing that it is being handled very differently across different departments, where some chairs are making an effort to not overburden their faculty with many different preparations. There is some room on there for that traditional spring renewal, possibly for some handover time with the corresponding faculty member, and in other places where there seems to be a really heavy loading that still falls within the requisite hours. That's my concern.
Okay. I have a thought. I don't know that I'm quite ready to say it publicly. Can I take this offline and have a conversation with you, Judy? I want to talk through an idea that I just had.
Okay.
Before I go any further, the last thing I do want to say is I acknowledge that the amount of teaching that is available from program to program and department to department, school to school for the spring term is not yet uniform. And until we get to that uniform, there will be some differences in the amount of teaching that is available to faculty. That is part of the process that we are going through. However, the approach to and the philosophy behind how much work a faculty member should be reasonably given should not be variable. The amount of work is variable, but that thought process behind trying to ensure to acknowledge what you just said, that the time for renewal for course development, for professional development, certainly needs to be taken into account as we are assigning work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judy, for your thoughtful question. Thank you, Chris, for taking a crack at it and having a good thought that you're going to expand on later. I have a question here from the Q&A. It goes as follows. During the last 2 town halls, you advised that you would be looking into the constant extensions and lack of policy around fixed-term admin positions. Could you give us a target date as to when you will be addressing this? Right, so looking at our panel here to see if Diane, maybe I can turn that one to you.
Absolutely, thank you. And then I will ask David to add in if I have missed anything. So our last HR reports that we have examined at the executive team showed that there were 53, again, please correct my numbers if they're wrong, 53 fixed term admin contracts that were in existence. And we're breaking those down by what's connected to strategic investment priorities, what's connected to the R3 project, the big project that we are working on for our student information system, what is connected to ongoing work. And so with that breakdown, there has been more reach out with David and his team, with the respective owners of those contracts, the managers of those contracts. And from a target date perspective, I would want to have that more informed with David's response, if there is a target date that we have, or if we are continuing to work with our operational managers to examine the work. So I know that the breakdown has happened and the work is ongoing.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was 50, there's 58 currently as of
Yeah.
March. Right now we've analyzed the data. We're now working with each of the respective groups and people leaders to have those discussions to really see what is the opportunity potentially to look at options for those fixed term admins as well. So that workup was probably going to take at least another 8 to 12 weeks just to have those discussions based on current capacity. And I think it's at that time we'll have more insights on next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, David and Diane. Okay. Next question here. Actually, let's see here. Okay, it's a survey related question. We'll grab this one here, but then we'll move to a non-survey question here. Question here is, thank you for this, as it's wonderful that we have this data. Though there are good results on engagement and response rate, I'm wondering if those are not engaged or are struggling, have not responded to the survey. Usually engaged people are the ones that respond. And if the college will also take this into consideration with support and planning. So it's a question of those that didn't respond, how do you address their needs as well? David, I don't know if that's something you're prepared to address.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, we're always focusing on how we can improve response rates, and there's always lessons learned we're taking forward, and we will do that. But that being said, it's through the discussion, the dialogue, the interactions between people leaders, their respective teams, and it can come in different formats, as I mentioned, one-on-one huddles, team meetings. But it needs to start with that dialogue and that listening, providing those opportunities to listen and hear the employee voice. And that's maybe for sure where there's an opportunity to solicit additional impact for maybe those that didn't have the time or opportunity to respond. So once again, I'll turn it back. It's really about having really robust, safe discussions between the people leader and their respective teams. Thank you.
Yeah. And those discussion will happen once the results are, the departmental results are shared with the ACLT members, and there's that cascade of meetings to discuss those at the more granular level with the people, and everyone will get a chance to participate. Whether you actually responded to the survey or not, you have a chance to engage with your supervisor. So very important. All right, our next question here, it says that we use AG, capital AG grades to support students who found themselves overwhelmed by childcare and other unexpected complications when we went into lockdown in March 2020. There was no mention of that being an option when the provincial lockdown was announced in recent weeks. Is this something we are offering students as an option again this semester? Chris, can I turn this one over to you?
Sure, absolutely. The Agritat grade is not something that we created during the pandemic. It is a regular part of our grading scheme and our grading options. And while there may not have been formal mention of it as an option, it always exists. It's part of the grading scheme, and yes, it can still be utilized within the grading policy as it exists. I would expect that recognizing we are still in a pandemic and there are still many factors that are making it more challenging for our learners to be successful, that we would likely be more receptive to using the AG grade than we would outside the pandemic. And so I would suggest that it is a very reasonable option for a grade under the correct circumstances.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for that question. Our next question, it says actually for HR and for Chris. Salary calculations for other than full-time faculty are very cumbersome and time-consuming with many moving parts and many people involved. Brackets, managers, support, comp, HR, and the hire. A large contributor to this is that the process exists entirely outside of our HR system, college HR system. It all happens by email with manual tracking. Is the college looking at putting resources to streamline this process? With the current process being as it is, it affects the ability for the faculty to gain access to our system and into the classroom teaching. I don't know who wants to start first. Diane? Okay, all right.
Thanks, and thank you for this question. One of the things that within our total compensation team, there has been some efficiencies looked at for this with the creation of a portal to store some of our former salary calculations so that there's easier access for chairs, easier access so that when we are continuing to complete these, they can be done in an expedited way. So I know that there has been some steps put in place to improve the process. I don't have all of the level of details, but I can indicate to you that certainly the total compensation team has been working on this, and they're doing their best efforts in improving this process. That's from the HR comp perspective. Chris, I'm not sure if you have things to add to that.
Well, this was one item that had been fairly thoroughly explored by the AC Way team, and there had been a team put together to look at this particular process. There were a number of actions that were proposed, and frankly, then the pandemic hit. And so that group is being revitalized. Those proposals are being dusted off and looked at, and we recognize that this is a systems problem that ends up being a significant workload for the hiring side, the management side, the HR side, as well as the prospective employee. And the back and forth. So we are actively looking at trying to streamline this and find solutions to make this less burdensome than it currently is.
Okay, thank you very much to both of you, Diane and Chris, to answer this question. I'm looking at the time here and mindful that most people have something else usually at the top of the hour. We've committed to stop at around this time here for our town hall. Of course, we extended the Q&A for the pulse survey results set of questions because there was a lot of interest and a lot of questions there. But we are committed to providing answers to all the questions that have been put in the Q&A, no matter if it's for the pulse survey results or for this segment. And as per our past practice, we will post those questions and the answers to our MyAC a few days after the town hall. So what I will say again in my closing remarks before I turn to Ron for closing our gathering is that we've had some good results being brought to us by Metrics at Work. This is the culmination of your answers, and the significant amount of our employee population responded to this pulse survey. We added questions this year specific to COVID-19 pandemic. And again, we have wealth of information at our disposal here that will inform our way forward in regard to work-life balance, in regard to work distribution, flexibility that we need to integrate in our work. Many of the things that we've learned as lessons during the pandemic that we want to incorporate into our practice as we emerge from this situation over the next while. So great results. I want to thank the entire college community for the time and the thoughtfulness you took in answering that survey, both in the numerical scores you gave and your comments. And as I said, we endeavor to provide you with that information through your departmental results so that we can take action on the great things that we need to improve on, as well as learn from those departments that are doing so well. I have to say, there was one question there that said, well, what's Colin doing so well for security folks. So that's a great thing too, is to see, well, what is this department doing that we could learn from, and being able to share those practices so that we can all continue to improve. So looking forward to sharing those results and seeing them put into action. And with that, I will turn the floor to Ron for closing.
Oh, you won't go, Claude. So I had received a text from my mom this morning and said, don't forget today's Earth Day. And so if you are speaking at all today, to remember to acknowledge our mother and the fact that she was given traditional and sacred instructions at the very beginning, and that after everything we have done as two-leggeds, our mother continues to care for us, and she continues to provide for us and to watch over us and to protect us. And one of the other things I just will sort of throw a line in the water for is that in mid-May, His Honor Murray Sinclair will be joining us for a talk, and I'll be excited to share and help promote more of that, and invite folks to come and take part of that, because I think there'll be some really interesting teachings and exchanges there as well. So as a closing, one of the things I had committed to the college, and specifically Claude, to do was to learn how to do it in my language, and I'm still working on that, so eventually I'll be able to do that. But for today, we of course acknowledge everybody that has come together. We acknowledge all of you, and we acknowledge each other for the good-mindedness, the good work, the good intention that we put into our work every day for our community. We acknowledge all of those who came before us, our ancestors, who in many ways had to sacrifice, and in many ways had to give a lot in order for us to be where we are today, to do the work that we do. And then most importantly, we acknowledge those faces that have yet to come, those ones that are down the river just a little bit, those ones who are not yet born. For ultimately, it's for those that we do this work, and so that they have a better tomorrow, a good place to start their journeys. And our ancestors and ourselves, we have a lot to contribute to that. And so we wrap our minds and our thank yous all together. Particularly today being Earth Day, we throw those thank yous into the four directions. We acknowledge that all these different levels of creation had once received traditional instructions, and they're continuing to live and to honor them. And so we thank them for that. Our minds are one, and may the peace, the great peace, be in your heart. Stay safe and healthy. Yawango.
Thank you, Ron.